birthday, James.
It's your birthday?
Yeah.
We'd never have guessed. Happy birthday to you.
Oh my goodness.
Birthday to
What's going
you.
on?
Happy birthday, dear Mark. Happy birthday to you.
Oh, that's very kind.
RFK Jr. wouldn't allow you to eat that cake. Far too much sugar.
Although he said he likes, it's fine for people to eat Big Macs. Well, that's true.
We'll get you a Big Mac next year. It's Wednesday afternoon here in Washington, D.C., day 11 of Trump 100, with me, James Matthews.
Me, Martha Kelner.
And me, Mark Stone.
Coming up, why government employees are being offered 8 months' pay to resign.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. faces the first of his confirmation hearings on the Hill. But what does Trump's pick to run the US health system really believe?
And Donald Trump has got new plans for Guantanamo Bay. He plans to use it to house 30,000 deported migrants. We'll explain all of that.
Yeah, loads to talk about. Let's get going. Okay, we mentioned this on yesterday's episode after that spiky intervention from his own cousin, but RFK, Robert Kennedy Jr., faced the first of his congressional hearings to be confirmed as Donald Trump's new health secretary on Wednesday morning.
Yes, he was grilled by Republican and Democrat senators from the Finance Committee. They got to question him first and then vote to decide if they want him to recommend him to the Senate for final approval.
Martha, RFK Jr. was one of Donald Trump's more controversial picks, yeah?
Yeah, a crowded field, James, but he's certainly up there. RFK Jr. is part of the Kennedy dynasty, son of Bobby Kennedy, nephew of JFK. That, of course, is a Democrat dynasty, and until recently, RFK Jr. was a Democrat too. In fact, he ran for the Democratic nomination for the 2024 election before switching to being an independent. Then, eventually, after a number of scandals, including a mystery around him dumping a bear in Central Park.
Oh, we'll tell people about that. We have to. We'll get to that.
He ended up endorsing Donald Trump after all that. He's got a pretty colourful past. He's been open about his struggles with addiction, including with heroin. He had a career as an environmental campaigner and more recently has become a prominent voice, perhaps the prominent voice in the anti-vax movement, although he's always claimed that he's not against vaccines themselves, but is just advocating for greater testing and is against mandatory vaccinations.
Yeah, you spoke to him, Martha, didn't you? In 2022, he was campaigning against the Pfizer COVID vaccine. What was he like?
Do you know what? When I was reading that letter from Caroline Kennedy, which I know you guys discussed at length the other day, in it she painted a picture of a very charismatic man with a magnetic personality. And that's exactly the guy I saw on stage. He was the headline act, if you like, at this anti-vax rally in Washington, D.C. Tens of thousands of people there. And he may say that he's just a vaccine skeptic and he's just an advocate for greater testing, but this was an anti-vax rally. This was the height of COVID, but no one was wearing masks. He even compared the COVID-19 requirements in the US to conditions in Nazi Germany. This is what he said. He said, even in Hitler's Germany, you could cross the Alps into Switzerland. You could hide in an attic like Anne Frank did. He did later apologise for those comments, but I asked him about his stance on vaccines.
Some people would say you're profiting from a public health crisis here. What do you say to that?
I would say that Pfizer is the one. If you're worried about somebody profiting from a public health crisis, you should be investigating Pfizer. You should be investigating Moderna.
Just a note on RFK Jr.'s voice there. You know, he has this quiver, this raspy voice, and he's actually afflicted by a rare neurological condition, which is what causes that issue that he has with his voice. He says it's not painful for him to talk, but he does have Botox injections in his vocal cords to try and combat the problem.
He's a fascinating character. I've watched as he was one of those at one point trying to fight Donald Trump for the presidency, and then like many people, he came round and was brought into the fold. But his views on many things are different, interesting, controversial. He said that vaccines cause autism. He's campaigned against fluoride in drinking water, suggested that there is a link between 5G and cancer rates, and suggested that antidepressants lead to school shootings. And I think it is those views and others which have pointed critics to suggest that he is wholly unsuitable for the candidate of defence of Health Secretary.
Yeah, in the hearing today, he seemed to roll back on his previous stance.
I support the measles vaccine. I support the polio vaccine. I will do nothing as HHS Secretary that makes it difficult or discourages people from taking.
That's not the only thing that RFK Jr. appeared to roll back on either. He also said that he supports Donald Trump where he is on abortion rights.
I agree with President Trump that every abortion is a tragedy. I agree with him that we cannot be a moral nation if we have 1.2 million abortions a year. I agree with him that the states should control abortion. President Trump has told me that he wants to end late-term abortions, and he wants to protect conscious exemptions, and that he wants to end federal funding for abortions here or abroad. That's Title X. I serve at the pleasure of the president. I'm going to implement his policies.
It sounds like he's doing what I certainly felt a few other candidates who are now in Trump's cabinet have done, which is to kind of backtrack on some of their more controversial claims. Pete Hegseth certainly did a bit of that during his hearing. Is that what's happening, do you think, Martha?
Yeah, I was wondering for a second there whether RFK stood for Reverse Ferret Kennedy, because he seemed... That's one for you, James. But he does seem to be rowing back on all sorts of issues, and abortion is one of them. He has previously, and as far as we know, for his whole adult life, been pro-choice. In fact, during his nomination campaign, he said he believed in unrestricted access until the point of fetal viability, which is generally agreed to be about 24 weeks. He said he'd back legislation to restore Roe versus Wade, which gave women the constitutional right to choose. But since his nomination from Donald Trump has arrived, he's been quiet on the issue. And now he's saying he'll fall into line with whatever the president thinks, which seems an astonishing about turn on such an important issue.
I think RFK Jr. is vulnerable. It wouldn't surprise me if enough Republicans decide that he isn't the man for the job, and I doubt Donald Trump will risk the kind of political capital that he did on pushing Pete Hegseth through. I think with RFK Jr., Trump has played a Machiavellian masterclass. You know, he was an opponent prior to the election. He pulled him into the tent, rinsed him for all the votes that he was worth, and now will lose not a lot if RFK Jr. doesn't make the cut. I don't think there will be many tears shed if RFK doesn't get confirmed beyond the man himself.
I would have liked to have heard more about his actual policy suggestions, because I think a lot of people would agree that, you know, there is a lot of work to be done in addressing obesity in the country, and he's made a lot of sensible points on that, but I don't think we quite heard the policy suggestions to back that up.
I think for so many Americans, they don't like necessarily the characters that surround Donald Trump, but the sort of bedrock of policies they actually see as quite sensible, and I think that's part of the reason why Trump won.
Yeah, I think there's a message and there's the messenger, and in this case, you got a messenger who, you know, we hear puts baby chickens and mice into a blender. There is the story of the bear, the famous story of the bear. You're going to tell us?
Who wants to tell that one? So about 10 years ago, a bear cub was discovered in Central Park, and it caused a news frenzy. No one could understand how that bear cub could possibly have got to Central Park in New York. It was a mystery until a few months ago when, incredibly, RFK Jr. revealed that he was the person that placed the bear cub in Central Park. And he said that he was in upstate New York, a car in front of him hit a bear cub, killed it. He decided to pick the bear cub up, put it in the back of his car because he was going to skin it for the fur and eat the meat. He then drove to New York City for a posh dinner with friends, and everything got delayed. And so He said then a little bit of the redneck got into me, and he decided that it would be quite funny to drop the bear in Central Park and hide it so that someone would then find it, and then a mystery would ensue. And so it did.
Now, consider this email if it landed in your inbox, and consider what you would think. It goes like this. Reply resign to this email, and we'll pay you until the end of September. Don't, and your job may change, relocate, or might not even exist in a few months' time. You have until February the 6th to decide. That is the email that was sent to employees across the federal government that received that on Tuesday evening.
Yeah, more than 3 million people work across central government here in the United States. It's all part of the president's wide-ranging plan to cut government costs. It's not yet clear, though, how many employees will take the offer, but our colleagues at NBC News believe that up to 10% of government workers could accept.
Yeah, there is the hand of Elon Musk in all of this. He remembers heading up Trump's push for government cost-cutting efficiency via DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency.
Yeah, Elon Musk's fingerprints are all over this. He's very clearly involved in this scheme. You can glean that as well from the email subject line, which was fork in the road. Musk sent an email to Twitter employees back in 2022 with the exact same subject line when he was announcing those huge layoffs there as well. And Musk, as you might imagine, is characterising this as a generous offer and a necessary move to make the federal government more cost effective.
I guess the problem with it is that if people don't take up the offer, if they decide they want to stay in the federal workforce, then what? So it's kind of these threats that Trump is imposing, which he is also hoping that he can follow through on, so he can get the money from the tariffs, so that he can cull the federal workforce. But if people comply or not, then the plan kind of falls apart, doesn't it?
The whole point of this as well is to try and make government more efficient. Well, it stands to reason that the most efficient government employees would also be those who would have the best opportunities of employment in the private sector. So will this offer just entice those people who know that they can walk into another job elsewhere, and then in fact you're going to be left with federal government having perhaps the less effective, less efficient employees?
It's one thing to say something on the campaign trail. It's quite another to actually deliver on that.
Okay, Mark, what else has been going on?
Plenty. First of all, just before we started recording, kind of a surprise announcement from President Trump. He has ordered the Department of Defense and Department of Homeland Security to make ready beds for 30,000 people in the facility or the area, Guantanamo Bay, where terror detainees have been held for many years. It's an infamous place, synonymous with the US war on terror, with rendition, torture. Orange jumpsuits and now will be used, if President Trump is accurate in what he's saying, to house immigrants. Martha, I think you went there a few years ago, didn't you?
I did, yeah. Back in June 2021, I went for the pre-trial hearing of an alleged Al-Qaeda commander. So Guantanamo Bay, the detention camp, is a military prison which is within Naval Station Guantanamo Bay. We managed to persuade them to let us have a look at the old Camp X-Ray, which is the most notorious part of the detention centre. That's the place where the pictures of detainees in the orange jumpsuits, shackled, kneeling in the baking hot, midday sunlight. That's where those pictures were taken. And it's now completely closed down. The place is overgrown with weeds wrapped around the barbed wire. And other than that, it's a fairly, it could be any other American town. There's a McDonald's there, there's a bowling alley, there's an Irish bar. You can even buy little Guantanamo Bay fridge magnets in the gift shop. And I think at the moment there's around 5,000 people there. Very sleepy place. Obviously having 30,000 migrants there would change, that place pretty significantly.
It is true that there is a small migrant holding centre in Guantanamo at the moment. It's completely separate to the military prison where the terror detainees have been held, and it appears as though President Trump wants to expand that to make it honestly colossal. I mean, 30,000 is a huge number. It's indicative, I think, of the problems, the logistical problems that Trump and the team are finding with this very ambitious plan to deport so many people. They need somewhere to put them while they hold them before they can get them back to the countries where they came from.
Yeah, ICE, the immigration enforcement, they've got funding for 37,000 beds, and they're running at a capacity of 41,000 at the moment. So
yeah, well, there you go.
There's pressure. Trump doesn't want his plan to go awry because of the practicalities.
Now, to something altogether different. Yesterday, in the press briefing, the first one with Caroline Levitt, she said quite a lot of stuff. One thing, I was like, I heard it, I thought, can that be true? She said that the Biden administration had been planning to send $50 million worth of condoms to Gaza, which seemed extraordinary. I wasn't the only one whose ears were pricked by this. Was it true? It turns out that friends or colleagues I know at USAID, I've been talking to them about whether it could possibly be true. Turns out it is not true. USAID does procure condoms for Africa, very important, and they buy them for 5 cents a condom, which means that if the US was sending $50 million worth of condoms to Gaza, that would be 1 billion condoms. Which, look, I mean, it's funny and it's not funny. It's funny because of the subject matter. It is not funny because contraception to developing countries is very important. It's all part of soft power that rich countries like America can do. So they are sending them to where they are needed. They are not sending 1 billion of them to Gaza. It is also not funny because if experts are saying it is plain nonsense, then why is the press secretary saying it as fact in the briefing room? We will find out how much more she says that is not true.
Good point, well made. That's it for today. As always, if you've enjoyed listening, please do follow the feed or share it with a friend.
And remember, you can email us on trump100@sky.uk. We'd love to hear from you.
And that's it for day 11 of Trump 100. Your birthday, Mark, what are you doing tonight?
Actually, I've been invited to the British Embassy.
Oh, wow.
Because the current ambassador is leaving and they're having a drinks thing to which many journalists, I think, have been invited. Why aren't you coming, James?
Well, I'm going to watch the Washington Wizards basketball team.
That sounds a lot more
So
fun.
there you go.
There you go. That sounds
There's a difference right there. See you tomorrow for day 12. Do join us.
Bye.
Bye-bye.